Hello and welcome to Street Talk. This is a podcast where we share what's happening in and around our neighbourhood to keep you in the loop with trending topics and tactics to stay at the top of your game. I'm James McGregor, and today we're talking to Shara Evans, technology expert and futurist, on her prediction of what's to come. So thank you very much for joining us, Shara, and it was great to hear your presentation today at the Pinnacle 2019 conference. Tell me about a little bit about your background. How did you get into what you're into in terms of being a futurist and understanding technology in all of its glory?
Oh, gosh. I'll try to make a very long story very short. I've been in the world of technology for all of my adult life, but even as a little girl, I was into science fiction and just really loved that whole world of thinking about the future. And as a technologist, I've had lots of different roles, including software design, early on. And I kept making predictions that turned out to be true. And people started to label me a futurist because my predictions kept evolving and turning into reality. So it's a label that I've actually earned and didn't seek to become a futurist, but it sort of happened. And a few years back, I decided I'm really going to embrace this and go back to my love of all kinds of technologies, whether it be artificial intelligence and robots and augmented and virtual reality and 3D printing and you name it, and take it all in and combine it with all kinds of medical advances and use my background in running tech analyst firms and strategic consulting and help audiences in lots of different vertical and just industries understand what these very rapidly technology changes will mean for them and their organizations or their clients or their families or themselves as individuals.
That's great. I mean, and in particularly in real estate, obviously you've got a crowd at this particular event, which are a real estate company where there's a family of us of about 5,000.
That's a big family.
Yeah. So with particular reference to technology, innovation and real estate, is there some of the key points that you presented today? Would you mind sharing with the rest of our network?
Well, I won't go through the whole presentation or we'd be talking for a really long time. A couple of key points are the move to smart cities, where basically we're putting in sensors all throughout our cities to give us real-time actionable insights. And one of the examples that I gave was out of Chicago, where they're deploying something called the Array of Things, which is a network of sensors that will give everything from pollutants to barometric pressure to ambient vehicle noise and pedestrian traffic and you name it, all from these beehive-looking sensors put on light posts in 500 spots around the cities. So if you like, giving you a sense of what is happening in a micro neighborhood and making it open source so that people can design apps. So if you think about it from a real estate perspective and you're trying to sell a commercial real estate property and you've got an app that can show you real data week by week, month by month, year by year of foot traffic in front of a particular property, that's a really powerful tool.
Very, very powerful sales tool.
Or if you're selling a house and the people buying the house want to live in a nice, quiet neighborhood. And once again, you can show them real-time data that, shows that the ambient noise and vehicular traffic are very light. Once again, it's real-time data that can go back historically and be a really powerful tool.
Absolutely.
And another really interesting technology is augmented reality, which is the ability to superimpose a vision of a digital world on top of the real world. And there are so many applications for real estate. One that I used today was an example from Dulux, the paint company, where they've designed an augmented reality app that literally allows you to use your smartphone and point it at a room and use a palette of picking colors to show what a room will look like in all different colors.
There's nothing better to paint a picture than you almost need to, especially from an interior design or renovation perspective. So that's really clever.
Yeah, well, not only that, but if you think about it, one of the challenges that real estate agents often face is they've got a property that they know has beautiful potential, but the owners of the property before they sell don't want to paint it, and it might have like really ugly colors, and they're trying to convince, paint this picture of what it will look like when it's a neutral color or a color of choice of a particular, potential property owner.
Absolutely.
And if you can show them this property with the color scheme of their choice, then that's a super powerful sales tool.
Completely. Conversely, with the buyer as well, a lot of people aren't really born with the instinct of being able to appreciate what a space could look like.
Yes.
So to be able to show them that visually must be a strong...
Yeah, and there are apps that let you look at, how different furniture might look in a room and all sorts of things that I think today's real estate agents can use both in the buying and the selling side of things that can be real-world tools that are today tools as opposed to just tomorrow tools.
Completely. I feel there is a lot of agencies and some players in real estate have sort of toyed with and played with augmented reality. I've seen it a bit around, but it's more of a gimmick. It hasn't really reached the mainstream. Are there many things that do you think in augmented reality in the last, say, 12 months that have advanced quite significantly?
Well, when I talk about augmented reality headsets, the actual glasses, as opposed to holding up, an iPhone or an Android, which is how a lot of them, there have been a lot of advances in the actual headsets where they're lighter, the processing speeds are a lot faster, the clarity of image is a lot clearer than it was 12 or 24 months ago. Yeah. So that's where I'm seeing the real advances. The other real advantage that I see for real estate is in videography with 360-degree views, so that you can have a virtual walkthrough of a property without physically trumping through 50 properties. You can actually do it from your living room, or being able to visualize something that is off the plan and literally do a walkthrough. In an example I used was a company that has used drones to do footage at every different height of a proposed apartment complex.
Oh, that's quite clever.
And, that way, if I'm looking to buy an apartment on the 18th floor, I can do a virtual walkthrough and look outside the window of every single room on the 18th floor and see the exact view as it was filmed, at the time. That's not to say another building might not pop up, in between when that was filmed and whenever it's bought. But that's much more convincing than looking at something that's on a piece of paper.
Absolutely.
So lots and lots of opportunities there.
Yeah, great. And I heard you talking about Neuralink chips.
Oh, now we're going into the world, really into the world of the future of merging AI into our brains. And
that is a big leap from where we were, but it's fascinating and it's kind of a little bit scary at the same time.
Exactly. It's scary and in some respects, especially in the medical world, very exciting. So the idea that a lot of people in the technology world have is that one way to stave off irrelevance of humanity in a world where AI is getting smarter and faster all the time is to actually integrate AI into our own bodies, literally into our brains. And there's different ways that we might do it. Neuralink has one idea of doing it with chips. And just a few weeks ago, Elon Musk, whose brainchild it is, announced his first chip called N1. And these chips are 4 millimeters by 4 millimeters, so smaller than, one hair on your head, in terms of thickness. And they have 10,000 electrodes each with no wires sticking out. And they're looking to do the first human trials by the end of 2020, that's next year, for people who have been paralyzed or have some sort of spinal disorder. So there's a medical purpose to doing it, to be able to regain control of their limbs. So you can imagine in a situation like that, that could be a huge leap in terms of someone's quality of life.
Absolutely.
But where you get into the worrying issues are when you start putting these chips in your brain, when you don't have a medical issue, you're just a normal person and you want to give yourself superpowers. So by superpowers, I mean the ability to think a question and get the answer automatically from the web, or suddenly increase your, computing power by 10,000 fold by literally, outsourcing your thought process to a supercomputer. But then who owns this data? What if your brain is hacked? What happens if this AI chip that uses deep learning, like all kinds of other AI, picks up on inherent biases that you might have as an individual, but may not even recognize. They're subconscious things. And your body physically takes action on an unconscious bias. So, or an unconscious action that you know, like let's say you're in traffic jam and somebody's cut you off, and you just for a fleeting second think, oh, I'd like to ram that person, you know, like it happens to all of us, right? Yeah. It's just like a natural. But what if your body actually did it? You know, it was a fleeting thought, and the AI wasn't able to distinguish between the fleeting thought and the motivation to actually take a specific action. And when it comes to brain science, even neuroscientists will say we don't understand completely the human brain. And we definitely do not understand with deep learning convolutional networks how they make their decisions. So we've got two real wildcard variables with A, not understanding all the intricacies of the human brain, and B, not understanding all the intricacies of how AI makes decisions. And you mesh them together, and what could go wrong? And the answer is, well, a lot could go wrong.
Absolutely everything, yeah.
So that's where I start to say, hang on, I think it's time to put on the brakes and understand a little bit more about what we're doing. And, you know, for medical purposes, where someone has zero quality of life, and this can be a lifesaver, by all means.
Makes a lot more sense, yeah.
That's a really good use. But when it comes to everyday people, we need to be very cautious before we start putting this or any other similar type of technology into our body that might have unintended consequences.
That's a very good point. I wanted to ask you also, I just another point in your presentation which pulled my attention was the smart contacts.
Yes. Oh, they're so interesting. In fact, I can't wait for them to come to market, but they keep getting pushed out and pushed out. So with smart contacts, what we're essentially doing is taking augmented reality, all the kinds of apps that you have on your smartphone today, facial recognition and cameras, plus biotech, and putting it into a translucent contact lens that combines all of it together, giving you the best of the pharma world and the smartphone world and ICT world all in one. There have been a lot of companies, both pharmaceutical and ICT, that have been working on this for a very long time. And in talking to some of my contacts in the industry, what I'm finding is that the holdup is more on the pharmaceutical side in getting everything to work properly and actually be safe for your eyeballs, and being able to deliver things like autofocus your vision without doing any kind of real damage to your vision, or being able to sense things like macular degeneration or glaucoma. Yeah, right. You know, can you imagine having a device that gives you autofocus and telephoto and infrared vision and all the apps that you see on your smartphone and facial recognition and all this other great stuff, plus no more reading glasses and night vision, and tell you when you've got a disease because it's picking up on it, you know,
That's
from
crazy.
The chemicals in your tear ducts. That's been on the cards for a while now, but it just keeps moving out 5 to 7 years, 5 to 7 years, 5 to 7 years. And I keep seeing it slide out further and further. So I'm not sure exactly when that's going to come to market, but I think it's a matter of time. It may be 10 years, maybe 11, it may be 7.
Yeah, right.
So one of the other things I wanted to say about smart contacts is that unlike putting a chip in your brain, a smart contact is like any other contact lens. You can take it in and out. So that means that you're not permanently putting something in your body that you don't have control of. And if you're not happy with the way that it's working, you just take it out. So there's less chance of things going disastrously wrong with a technology that, you know, like a contact lens that you can very easily remove by yourself without having to go to a doctor's surgery.
It sounds incredible. So tell me a little bit more around how you became so passionate about technology.
Oh, it started when I was a little girl. You'll laugh. I think it was watching Astro Boy when I was probably about 4 years old. And here's this little robot boy who's ostracized by everybody, but all he wants to do is save the world and fight off giant robots and aliens and mad scientists and do good. And he had rocket boots. And I remember being a little girl with a doodle pad trying to figure out how to design rockets to fit into the heels of my shoes. So that's when it started for me.
Yeah. Well, I remember Astro Boy. It was one of my favorite cartoons, actually. Given that there's so much in the field of technology and innovation, how do you actually keep up with the latest innovations? I mean, there's so much out there and there are so many sources. How do you actually keep sort of abreast with what's actually legitimate and what's...
That's an excellent question, because there's, so much fake news out there and a lot of disinformation as well. So my background is technology and hardcore science. So one of the things that I do as a technologist is that I track what's happening in research labs all around the world. And I look at the experiments that scientists are doing and extrapolate on where they might go. And from the futurist perspective, I look at similar developments by independent groups of scientists at different places around the world. And if I start to see a convergence on particular ideas or topics, and then I start to see investors put money into it, and I start to see trials that, even if they're early experimental, are starting to prove out, then to me that says, okay, this is something that has a very good likelihood of being a reality in X years' time, depending on where they're at in the experiments. So with something like brain-machine interfaces, then, we're still in the early stages. With something like augmented reality, there are lots of commercial products, so we're two completely different ends of the technological spectrum with those kinds of technologies.
Absolutely. And in terms of someone who had a similar passion for technology, and if you had to point them in the right direction of some resources that they could rely on, or even start to learn more about, are there sort of any particular resources you could suggest?
Well, I am an extremely eclectic reader and podcast listener. I listen and read to so many different things that it would be very difficult to point to any one source. But I would suggest that if anyone is interested in the general world of technology, connect to me on LinkedIn. I post lots of things about lots of different topics on LinkedIn. I also have a newsletter called my Future Tech newsletter that they can subscribe to just by going to blog on my website, which is sharaevans.com. And you can find out there. But there are so many sources. The thing to be aware of is what's legitimate and what's not. And before I republish something or post something, I do my due diligence and do my best to make sure that it's not a fake story.
Verify it, which is great. And that's, I guess there is so much out there. That's a good point.
Yeah, I'm a researcher by nature. So, before I'll post something, I'll have looked at, 10 different, articles, let's say, that talk about a particular innovation, or I'll go right to a scientific journal and, read through the science paper, even if I just skim it, and just say, okay, right, this is real.
Excellent. You spoke a little bit about Hyperloops in your presentation. Would you mind giving the listeners a little bit more of an understanding of the background, what it is, how it works, and what the future looks like?
It's a really exciting new mode of transport. And it came about initially in a white paper that Elon Musk published either late 2012 or early 2013 and made it open source. The idea is that you have a tube and you suck out the air so that it's at near vacuum, like outer space, and through magnetic levitation, use that to autonomously hurtle pods of either people or cargo through at super fast speeds. And because you've basically made it a vacuum, you can do that the same way that you can go much faster in outer space than you could in the atmosphere of planet Earth. And there are a number of companies that have taken this idea and started to build test tracks and commercialize them, and quite a few all around the world. And it's a super exciting new fast train type of technology. And there are test tracks in various places that are being constructed. And a full-scale Hyperloop is being designed right now in the Middle East between Dubai and Abu Dhabi as part of their 2020 Expo. And if that one goes to fruition, which it looks like it will from early stages, there might actually be a couple of different companies that do, parallel Hyperloops, then we could see an hour and a half drive cut down to 12 minutes.
That's unbelievable. And is it primarily that Hyperloop in Abu Dhabi, is that a cargo created or is it a passenger created?
Well, right now it's still in the design stages, and I don't know whether they're going to put people through it in the early stages. I would say prudence would probably prevail, and the first things that will go through would be cargo at the very high speeds.
I'd agree with that.
Followed by people once, the safety has been proven. But there are Hyperloops being constructed all around the world. So that's just literally the first one. There's a proposal, actually several proposals in Australia to put a Hyperloop system along the east coast of Australia. And there's a company called Vic Hyper based out of RMIT that put a proposal forward several years ago that was literally showing how you could have Hyperloop tracks going not just between the capital cities, but also regional centers like Sydney and Newcastle and Canberra and Albury-Wodonga and out to Geelong and Ballarat, and do it in super short speeds. Like, can you imagine getting from Sydney to Newcastle in 10 minutes?
It would be incredible.
It will change the face of regional Australia, and it will change the property market too, because suddenly it will become very affordable to be able to live in a place like Newcastle or anywhere that there's a Hyperloop station and work in a major CBD. It's going to have a massive impact on property values if it happens.
Absolutely.
And just recently, there was another proposal from one of the other commercial companies, Hyperloop Transport Technologies, HTT. They did a parliamentary submission, and they believe that they can build an East Coast Hyperloop within 4 years and have a return on investment between 8 and 15 years.
That's pretty incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's so much faster than a fast train. We're talking an average cruising speed of 750 kilometers an hour and a top speed of about 1,250 kilometers per hour.
And so the experience of that in a vacuum, in that type of environment, would be
probably no different than on an airplane.
Yeah.
So you would be in a comfortable seat, and you'd probably have some sort of service, and like it hasn't been commercially designed yet, so I'm just imagining what it might be like.
So exciting.
But if you can imagine an ultra-fast bullet train type of technology, which is really, I think, part of the genesis of this, is that it would be very comfortable and hopefully very affordable as well, because that's what a lot of these companies are talking about, is affordability as well as ultra-high speed. And from the figures that I've seen, which are all preliminary costings, mind you, it looks like it would actually be orders of magnitude cheaper to build than a high-speed train system and get to more regional centers.
Well, that would be a game changer.
Yes.
I would like to ask you a couple more questions, just a few fun facts about, if that's all right. What's your favourite food? Through you.
You threw me. Okay. So I'm a vegetarian and gluten-free. So one of my favorite foods is gluten-free rice bread with smashed avocado.
Oh, well, that sounds like you nailed it.
Yeah, it's very tasty the way I make it.
And if you had a favorite quote, have you got a favorite quote or any kind of a lesson? If not a quote, a lesson, a favorite lesson that someone's taught you in your life?
Well, I couldn't say that someone has taught me this, but as a futurist, what I will say is this: the future is not set. It's up to us to make the future, and we can go in lots of different directions, but every single one of us contributes to the future that we live in.
That's a good answer. It's a very good answer. And if I was to ask you, what is the one thing you wish you knew when you were younger?
When I was a young girl, I was actively discouraged from the whole world of technology and mathematics. It was just that sort of age where they thought, girls, technology, the two don't match. If I could change that and have had all kinds of technology training when I was a really, really young girl, who knows what I would have invented.
You'd have started even earlier than you did.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I was imagining things when I was a little girl, but it wasn't until after I finished university that I actually got for real into the world of technology and started innovating. But if I had that ability as, a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old to actually start playing with technologies and designing and really doing stuff, who knows what the future might have had for me.
Well, maybe a lot of young ladies will have the benefit of listening to you and learning from you and starting a bit earlier. So,
I hope so. And that's actually one of my passions, is to be able to share with educators the need to encourage young women into technology fields. And it doesn't have to be coding. There are so many jobs that are in the technology realm that do not require writing software code, but just understanding and working with technology. It's not one size fit all. There's a lot of flexibility and a lot of fun to be had in the field.
Well, we'll have to make sure we share some of your resources to our network, including your LinkedIn profile, so they can learn more. And thank you so much for sharing some time and your knowledge with us.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you, Shara.
You're welcome.
We'd like to say a special thank you to our technology supporter, realestate.com.au. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's episode of Street Talk. You can find all of our podcast episodes on our Street Talk page on Workplace. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode, and we'll definitely be delivering more episodes to you soon, so stay tuned.